too bad we're not going to be able to refer to Return of the Jedi as just Jedi anymore. We're going to have to be more specific. Star Wars Episode VIII: The Last Jedi is directed by Rian Johnson and picks up directly after the ending of 2015's The Force Awakens. After the destruction of Starkiller Base, the Resistance has been exposed, and thus they are now on the run from the First Order. And meanwhile, Rey, the lead heroine of the last film, has found Luke Skywalker on an isolated island. She wants him to train her in the ways of the Force, but he is reluctant because it's time for the Jedi to end. That's all I can say without giving away anything that the marketing hasn't. I'm sure that just about any review you find for this movie will say that they're a huge Star Wars buff and they couldn't wait for The Last Jedi, so I'm just going to say ditto. The Force Awakens was a fantastic revival of this franchise. It was my favorite movie of 2015, and I dare say it surpassed A New Hope. So I had an exhilarating feeling that likewise, The Last Jedi could top The Empire Strikes Back and therefore become the greatest Star Wars movie ever. And it didn't, but it's still pretty darn good. My favorite thing about this movie was Luke Skywalker's arc. I can't say exactly what it is because, again, I want to save spoilers for later, but seeing him in this movie was like seeing Logan and Charles Xavier in Logan. You feel kind of downhearted because he's not the same character that you've always known. Not that it's a flaw with the movie, because when you let it sink in, it makes sense considering everything that he's gone through since we last saw him. And Luke's reasoning for why he wants to bring the Jedi to an end is something quite powerful. Predictably, I was also engaged in Rey trying to discover more about her past, and I liked that Poe Dameron had more of a role than last time. Another thing I loved about this movie is that it doesn't just shoehorn in callbacks to previous films, like the way that Rogue One just threw in a cameo from the Death Sentence in 12 Systems guy, just because there could be a cameo from him. Instead, The Last Jedi weaves these callbacks, visual allusions, and fan service scenes into the story, including one pivotal scene featuring a surprising appearance from a popular character from earlier in the series. My favorite action sequence in The Last Jedi is a scene at the beginning where Poe Dameron independently takes out numerous guns on the outside of a Star Destroyer with TIE fighters chasing him down. This scene works without bringing across the idea that Poe is invincible. Although he's pulling this all off on his own, you still get a feel for the danger that he's narrowly evading. So the battle sequences are intense, and like The Force Awakens, the visual effects contain an excellent balance of both CGI and animatronic puppets. The only sequence in this movie I have to say I disliked is one that takes place at a casino. The design and atmosphere of this place is pretty much the equivalent of a casino that you could visit here on Earth. It has nothing otherworldly about it, besides the fact that there are some aliens there. This is the point where the movie skimmed prequel territory, like that diner in Attack of the Clones that's just a real-life diner, just with a few aliens and a robot waitress. It was only at this point that it feels like The Last Jedi gave up on creativity. So it was just that scene and a particular moment near the beginning and another at the very end that I think could have used some work. I'll get into details about those other two later on. I will warn you, if you're going into this movie expecting all loose ends to come together, there are a few that do, like we learn why Luke isolated himself on the island. But there are still some unanswered questions, which I'll hold off on criticism toward until Episode 9. And there is no really big reveal. At least I'm making the argument that there's not. Again, I'll explain later. Actually, the biggest twist you get in this movie is that the phrase, "I have a bad feeling about this," is never uttered. Yeah, that's a first. So I didn't love this movie as much as The Force Awakens, though granted this is partially because The Force Awakens had the element of Rey and Finn learning about what happened before in the original trilogy, and I really dug that because it had this parallel to my generation discovering Star Wars and the impact it had on the world and on filmmaking. So that element, of course, is absent in The Last Jedi. But it's still a solid, satisfying addition to the series, and I can't wait to see how it all ends in Episode 9. That is how it all ends until we get to that new Star Wars trilogy that Rian Johnson is working on. As for Star Wars Episode VIII: The Last Jedi, I'm going to give it a 77%. That's a wrap. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this review helpful. Like if you liked, subscribe for more. This is Pop Culture. I'm Alex Pop.